Hello, everyone, and welcome to Not the Museum Thursday night. My name is Sylvia, and I'm the assistant curator here with the Niagara Falls History Museum. As usual, we're going to begin our evening with our land acknowledgement. The Niagara region of Ontario is located on the shared territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Chinnan people. The Chinnan people have called this land their home for thousands of years, and more recently, the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee have been sharing the land as one dish, one spoon, treaty territory. So tonight, our speaker is Dr. Laura Mullins. She's the assistant professor in the Department of Applied Disability Studies. Tonight, Laura and her team are going to be discussing Voices Lost in Crisis, Adults with IDD, Shared Lived Experience During COVID-19 Pandemic. You will notice on your screen that there is a Q&A feature with Zoom. So if you have any questions for Laura or her team tonight, please feel free to write your question in there. And at the end of the presentation, they will be answering your questions. If you are joining us on Facebook, please feel free to type in your questions in the comment section, and I will be monitoring that for Laura and her team. So without further ado, I'm going to hand this over to Laura.
Thank you very much. And thank you for hosting this and having this opportunity for us to share our research with everyone. First, I'd just like to introduce you to our research team at Brock. So in addition to myself, Dr. Maureen Connolly from the Department of Kinesiology has also been collaborating on this process. And we've had 3 dedicated research assistants who have dedicated several hours per week to this project for well over a year now. And I just want to mention Courtney Bishop, who is a PhD student in the Child and Youth Studies department at the program, and Mackenzie Strong, who is a former, she just graduated from our department, and Charity Blaine, who helped us with the photography. I'd also like to recognize and thank our Faculty of Social Sciences for providing the funds to be able to conduct this research. We had 13 participant collaborators in this research process. We had a range of ages from 25 to 47, 9 females and 4 males, with a variety of different diagnoses, including intellectual disabilities, autism, Down syndrome, and cerebral palsy. We had representation from all over Ontario, including rural and urban areas, and individuals living in various different living arrangements. So some individuals were living with their family in their home, some were living semi-independently, and others were cohabiting together as couples. We are very excited that we have some of our participant collaborators coming today to actually share their voices and share their experiences. So I'd like to introduce Damien and Tara.
Hello.
Hello, your camera is still off, so we can't see you yet. There we go. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome. And we also have Ashley.
Hello.
There she is. We have Crystal.
Hello.
And we have Zade and Lana. You're still on mute, so we can't hear you say hello, but I know you are.
Hello.
Hello. And I'd like to give a special shout out to Lori, Sharon, and Irene, who are not part of the panel, but also collaborated and are also watching our event tonight. So I am going to turn it over to the collaborators on the process to kind of talk about what we did.
Also, you missed Daniil. You missed Daniil on there too.
Yes, he wasn't here for the presentation.
Okay, I wasn't sure. I
So
just
those
saw
are
it.
just people who kind of helped us out with the presentation,
Okay.
but you're a very good advocate. Thanks, Crystal.
Yeah, no problem.
So just to get us started, I'm going to try and go through kind of the background piece as quickly as possible so that we spend as much time as we possibly can hearing from our participant collaborators who have some amazing things to tell us today. So just really briefly, in terms of background information, we know that there's a lot of research coming out right now and statistics around how people with different types of disabilities have been faring during the pandemic. And it hasn't been fantastic. So there's unequal access to healthcare services and other affiliated supports that are really required for people to have a good quality of life. We also know that individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities are getting limited access to information and mental health supports. There's an increased concern around social isolation, which is a concern anyways, but we're seeing that being exacerbated during this process, and a number of issues surrounding employment as well as income supports. So it's, not a great situation right now for these individuals. So we really wanted to give them the opportunity to be able to let people know what's going on in their lives. And so that, you're hearing it right from the mouths of people who are impacted. So there are a number of factors that kind of put individuals with intellectual disabilities at greater risk during this COVID pandemic. One is that they're more likely to be living in congregated living settings with other people, or requiring additional medical supports to come in, or just direct support workers to come in on a frequent basis. So it's harder for them to keep their circles smaller because they have requirements that require that people outside of their circle come in. The other thing is that they require support to be able to communicate their symptoms. And a lot of times what we heard, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, was that there were restrictions around individuals being able to have somebody come in with them when they were sick. So number of factors related to seeing this kind of disproportionate effect on this population. I'm actually going to hand this over to Ashley. Ashley, do you want to maybe let everybody know why we conducted this research?
Because about a year and a half ago, there was zero, zilch, nada, nothing out there that could help an individual such as myself and the other participants in the research project, or really anybody with IDD. I even Googled search services and stuff, and there was nothing in my area. Basically the project was to see what it was like to be in our shoes or wheels, as the case may be.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thanks, Ashley. So yeah, we definitely wanted to make sure that we were giving people the platform to let others know what was going on in their lives, to be able to help raise awareness about the lives of individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. But also we really wanted to show a lot of the resilience that we see in this population, and demonstrate some of the barriers and challenges that we know are happening as a result of the pandemic. Thanks, Ashley.
You're welcome.
So Photovoice as a research methodology is really fantastic because it's a collaborative research process. So it can really help us to empower the people that are involved with us, and it gives them an opportunity to be able to share aspects of their lives and the successes and challenges that they have. We got to do that over an 8 to 9 week period, and really develop quite the bond between all of us. It really just involves individuals using a different platform to be able to tell their stories, so they don't have to rely on traditional forms of communication like speech. They can use photographs, pictures, whatever it is that they want to communicate with. In this case, we used photographs to be able to express what was going on in their lives. So they did take the photographs, and then also did a journal. Some of them did some incredible jobs on these journals. You get to see some parts of that today. And they would meet with us and we would chat about what the pictures were about. So just a really brief overview of the process, because we are with the university, we had to go through a research ethics board. Then we did some recruitment through social media. I know that there are some of you on here tonight that helped us out with that, so thank you very much. We went through the consent process, did some preliminary skills assessment, Then we spent 4 weeks doing some training. Individuals went off for 8 weeks and did the pictures. We checked in every 2 weeks on how things were going. Then we did individual interviews with them and then worked with as a group to do some data analysis. And this is part of kind of our dissemination tonight, but we have been trying to get the word out there in various different platforms through different types of conferences and photo exhibits. So I'm not going to go through all of the steps tonight, but one that I really want to talk about is the consent process. I think what happens often with this population is that there's this assumption that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities do not have the capacity to be able to provide informed consent. And this creates a devastating barrier to people being able to participate in research in a way that is meaningful to those individuals. So typically what we see in traditional types of research is that individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, they're more objects of research than they are part of the research. And when they're not being objects and being studied about, then they use proxies. So they're going to other people who maybe support those individuals, who are their caregivers, to ask them the questions that they want answered, rather than including the individuals themselves in the research process. And a lot of the times these things happen right at the consent process because there is this assumption that they're not able to provide informed consent. So I wanted to start there and talk a little bit about how we addressed that concern. We worked with the individuals and their caregivers or support person, and we tried to individualize our consent process. So we would add visuals to explain the process and the different parameters of research, such as confidentiality and risks. We reduced the amount of information that we threw at people. Nobody wants that amount of information being thrown at them at any time. And then sometimes we would split the consent process into more than one session. And so it looked like working with them looked like finding out how they actually use their forms of expression. So we have one participant here today, for instance, who we worked with to say, you know, one of the questions around consent is, what will you be getting out of this process? And so for our participants, they were either getting a tablet or they were getting some money, depending on what they needed. And so I worked with them to say, what is something that he absolutely wouldn't want? And they sent me like a jar of beans. So we took a picture of the beans and we took a picture of the tablet and we took a picture of something random. And he was able to select for us what it was that he was going to get from the visual. So we worked really hard with them to work with their forms of expression. Tara, I know that you were really involved in that kind of a consent process, and there was a lot of concern around that. Do you want to just take a moment and maybe speak to that process of collaborating to work with the consent?
Sure. I'm speaking instead of Damien because Damien is nonverbal. And that was one of my primary concerns when we approached the research group, that I didn't know if Damien would be able to give his consent because Damien doesn't communicate in a typical fashion. Damien smiles, he turns away, he might vocalize, he might make an angry face, but he's not going to give you a typical yes and no answer. And he's definitely not going to give a long drawn out answer to a question. And so I'd say we probably spent 3 or 4 hours talking initially about how Damien communicated, and then coming up with ways that Damien would be able to communicate, and then going through the consent process. And I think we kind of hit a wall partway through the first session where it was quite obvious that Damien was done and wasn't interested in continuing. But we've been at it for over an hour, so I think it was,
fair enough.
tiredness. And so we booked another meeting and did it another day. So that took 3 or 4 meetings to do, plus all the work that you did organizing the script and the pictures. So he surprised his mom.
That was a nice surprise, absolutely. And Damien has the greatest facial expressions. When he told us that he was done, he basically flopped on the floor and was like, "Don't talk to me," which was fantastic. So it was wonderful getting to know him through this process. So once we got through the actual consent, we did do some training with the individuals. The goals of our training were really to aim at doing some confidence, getting them ready to be able to ask other people for consent and to take pictures and be comfortable taking those pictures and keeping a journal. And we also used kind of these processes to start forming some ideas around what they could take pictures of to capture some of these experiences. So we did 4 different sessions, and each session had 6 parts. We always went through and reviewed the research parameters. We always started with a welcome activity, and we would review our training material, put in a lot of practice elements, and then review the research, and then end with coming together to talk more about the pictures. So I'm just going to show you a really quick overview of the training. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it. The first session, we just did an overview of the research, and we talked a lot about safety measures. That was one of our concerns with using photographs and going into the community, so making sure people knew how to keep themselves safe. Then the next session, we talked about how do you go about getting consent and what does that look like. They got to watch some videos of my child and their friend saying yes and no in ways that were maybe not always clear, and get practicing around, you know, whether or not that looked like consent. Then we had a session completely on photography that was ran by Charity, who is a photographer. She did a wonderful job teaching us about staging and lighting and focus. And then we finished off with the things that we need to keep in our journal on a weekly basis. So that took us about 4 weeks. Then we got into the data collection process. And this was probably the best experience I've ever had in my life. So they took photographs for 8 weeks. The individuals themselves were completely in charge of taking the photographs. And we kind of worked with some of our parents or caregivers to look at what does that look like for somebody who maybe is not able to hold the camera. How are they going to let you know that they are not happy with that? So that we were making sure that that was kind of in their hands. And I'm actually going to open this up. Zadeh, if you want to maybe talk a little bit about the process of taking all of the photos and making sure that you had the right one every week.
So they not took a photo that I did not like. She took a couple again, and I did choose one that I did like.
Mm-hmm. And like sometimes, how many times would you make Lana take a photo?
40. Not an exaggeration.
I know. One of the things that all of you will learn about Zadeh if you come this weekend next week is that Zadeh is a perfectionist. So I'm not surprised at all that you took over 40 photos and that it was really difficult at times for you to be able to choose the ones. And as you told me, that really were the ones that were going to tell your story, right? That were the most important for your story.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's why you were a perfectionist, which totally makes sense. Right?
Yeah.
Thank you, Zadeh. There was also a lot of fear around this time, just in terms of taking pictures and getting close to people. So, you know, nobody really wanted to get out too close to people. We have a lot of pictures that are taken from a distance. You can see some of them here. I believe the top right corner one is Zadeh and Lana in their car taking a picture of the lineup from a distance. We've got another individual at the bottom there who is hopefully watching tonight, and she is standing very far away from her work. So a lot of fear there, and just because there is an increased risk for people, right? Ashley, do you want to talk a little bit about the risks that kind of came along with getting a good image?
Sure. If someone points their camera at me, or like their phone camera at me, I almost always will smile. And we were trying to get, I think that way we were trying to get a photo that captures the person being unhappy of the whole COVID situation. And in order to do that, my dad, he said that my, I guess, direct support professional is a correct terminology, respite worker, whatever. was never going to, I would never see her again. And I burst out into tears and I was done for the evening. I would, let's just say my iPod grew wings.
I always love your sense of humor, Ashley. Your iPad grew wings. That's fantastic. I actually wish we could get a little bit closer. I didn't realize the picture was so small, but it's a pretty raw photo of you and your emotion.
My shirt says, "I hate everybody."
Which was perfect timing for your dad to pull that one on you, I guess.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ashley. Thanks for sharing. The other thing that a lot of our participants talked about with the photography was how surprised they were that people were willing to have their photos taken. I think there was a lot of anxiety around having to ask people for consent. And so you can see here we have a picture from one of our participants that was taken of a dentist who was more than happy to have their picture taken for this project. So that was our photography stage. Next week, we're going to talk more about our results. So make sure you come on back and you'll get to see more photos. After they finished doing the photographies at the same time, we also asked them to keep a journal. And those journals were used to kind of help participants remember some of the details about what was happening when they took those photos and what they wanted to share with us. And we would have people kind of bring up the journals during our check-ins. For the most part, people didn't mind taking the journals. I think, Ashley, you had talked a little bit about how you had experienced doing that and you were happy with it. You were okay with it?
Yeah, I've been writing journals since probably like 1993. For Easter Seals camp, we would always like counselors or me would like draw a picture, write, "Oh, I went swimming today," or whatever, or drew mom a picture. I don't know. I didn't mind writing in them, but it was a hard process to like start the sentence because I have autism. I think in pictures, so I thought, this is perfect. I don't have to write anything. It's just pictures. And then came the journal. I'm like, oh, for crying out loud. So it was basically like the quote says, it was basically like living in a comfortable jail with awesome food.
I love it. Thanks so much, Ashley. For others, the journal was really, really beneficial, but it took a really long time and it was a more difficult part of the process, but one that I think was really beneficial. If we go to the next slide there, we actually have a journal entry from Zade. Zade, do you want to maybe read this journal to the people that are here today?
Zade has asked if I can read it for her.
Absolutely.
So I can be her go-go gadget voice for right now. Big uncomfortable feelings. This journal entry took about 4 hours to write for Zade, but it was very important. COVID and the shutdown and the isolation and the changing rules and the yuck of it all sometimes gives me big uncomfortable feelings. This picture was taken of me on a day when I was having a lot of big uncomfortable feelings because of the pandemic. Sometimes I can make myself smile and try to be happy. Sometimes I cannot. There are a lot of big uncomfortable, there was a lot of big uncomfortable feelings that day, like a giant swirl of sad, scared, angry, lonely, exhausted, and invisible.
Thank you. And thanks for sharing that. I think I didn't mention it, but these journal entries are also being used for analysis, and parts of them will be published so that people can hear some of these perspectives. And Zade, you did such an incredible job on your entries. I know that they took you 4 or 5 hours at a time to write them, but they're spectacular. So thank you.
Well, welcome.
So the thing that we did every 2 weeks, so that while they were taking the photos and doing the journals, is we also did weekly meetings or bi-weekly meetings with them just to see how they were doing, check in, make sure people didn't have any concerns, see if they wanted to get together to talk about things so that they can think of more ideas for pictures. But I think for me, this was probably the most rewarding and surprising part of this project was these check-ins, and primarily because all of us look forward to them. Crystal, do you want to talk a little bit about how you felt about being in these meetings on a regular basis?
Sure. I think it helped to get with each other each week. It kept us focused on what we needed to do and stay where we needed to be, because sometimes life gets busy. It's a challenge to stay focused, and it helped us to keep focused in the craziness of life stuff.
Yeah, so you found that it helped to keep you accountable through the process. Yep. Absolutely. Ashley, did you want to add to that?
I found it awesome because before this I had zero, zilch, nada. So did like a lot of other people with disabilities. But my point is, this was kind of like my bubble that I would have at Easter Seals camp, where everybody got it. And this bubble, like this Brock bubble, I call it. I guess I call that. It was like Easter Seals camp, but like online, and everybody did get it. Even the researchers or like the teachers.
Thanks, Ashley. I think we definitely don't have the same insider knowledge, but you taught us a ton through these check-ins. I think every check-in I went away going, oh my God, I never thought about that. And I'm pretty sure it became a game to see who could make Courtney cry.
Yeah, that was fun. That was a lot of fun.
Thanks, guys. Love you all.
Love you too, Courtney.
So once we had done the photo stage, as well as the journals and the check-ins, we actually met with all of the participants to do more one-to-one interviews. And for these interviews, we had the participants choose who they wanted to interview them and be there. We felt that rapport was really important. We were talking about some pretty vulnerable things. And so we just wanted to make sure that people were comfortable with who they were talking to. So we interviewed them all. There were a couple things that came out of the interviews in terms of people talking about their experiences. The first one that really shocked us that we hadn't thought about before was having to decide on just 3 photos to talk about in our interviews. So remembering that Zadeh on a single day might have taken 20, or Tara and Damien might have taken 40 pictures. They were being told or asked to only choose 3 over the 8 weeks to talk about in more detail. Damien, Tara, you had a pretty good response to this. How did you feel about it when you were told you were only allowed to have 3?
We had actually spent quite a bit of time whittling down the pictures that we had taken to submit in the first place. And so then to try and pick 3 of those, it's really challenging because Damien doesn't necessarily indicate easily, yes, I like this one over that one. We already had all the pictures that we liked. And in fact, we didn't pick 3, we picked 4.
Yes, that's true. Don't go telling everybody that. You're going to get me in trouble.
But it did take a very long time of going back and looking through, and we actually got opinions from other family members because, well, we had already picked the ones that he liked, and there was a lot of them to begin with.
Absolutely. And Zadeh, do you want to add to that? Because you had a similar reaction.
Yeah. I felt like I had all worked so hard to have my book hold in order to make me feel like my book was being translated. I felt like I had worked so hard to have my book heard.
It's the same sentence twice.
And all they did to make me feel my book was being translated.
Yeah. And I remember that day. I remember coming on and I wasn't expecting your reaction. And I was like, I think Sade's mad at me. And then you said that and I was like, oh my goodness, I had never even thought about that. So I know you would never be mad, but I felt terrible. It was one of those moments where I was like, oh, again, teaching me another lesson. Thanks for sharing, Sade. I appreciate that. The other piece was people talking about feeling like they really valued having support from their caregiver and their parent during the interview. I think sometimes the questions were a little bit difficult, not difficult because they were hard to understand, but difficult because we were talking about hard things. And it was nice to have that person beside them, keeping them, feeling safe and comfortable. I know for some of us, some of the parents, they did express some concern around feeling like they were translating and making sure that they actually were, authentically representing the voice of the person that they were representing. So that was, one of our challenges for sure. And then there was a lot of talk about working with the researchers and talking about their pictures and their life with those researchers during the interview. Ashley has become known for her zingers. Ashley, do you want to talk a little bit about your experience with the interview?
Well, like I just say things as it is. If people don't like it, well, that's just too bad. They can keep strolling. They can keep strolling or wheeling, as the case may be.
We love those zingers. I think we need to have a book of just Ashley zingers.
I actually want to get a T-shirt made that says, with the Kermit the Frog drinking tea, that says, "Is Jesus hiring?"
Oh, Ashley. I love it. I think you're fantastic. Thank you, Ashley. I'm sure you've got all of the people here laughing tonight. Also, there were also some discussions when we were doing the interviews just around the accessibility and the emotional journey of the whole kind of project and it kind of coming to a head with the interview. We have this beautiful email that Lana and Sade had actually sent us after one of our interviews that we wanted to share with you today. Lana or Sade, do you want to read this to people?
I've been elected.
Okay.
Yes, this was a good interview, but a hard interview because a lot of it was quite raw. But yeah, thank you for your presence and humanity this afternoon as we did that interview. I know it was a lot of times and some tough topics for tender hearts, yours and ours. Today is our COVID anniversary. 8,760 hours ago, we said goodbye to our lives as we knew them and entered into isolation due to the threat that the pandemic posed for us. 365 days ago, we started an extended adventure that we had no way of knowing what to expect, for how long and how deep. This has not been easy, despite our fun-looking pictures and posts. But we are doing what we can to stay safe, and we'll keep doing that until we can feel reasonably assured that we can safely return to some sort of public life. The convergence of that awareness and our rather intense week made for a few teary moments where breath and voices were caught, trying to explain to you what we wanted for your research project. In short, thank you for allowing us the decency and dignity of having some of this journey honored and heard. I know, even as the professional that you are, it is not an easy task. Sincerely, Lana and Zade.
Thank you for sharing. And again, this is why I cry. I mean, it's understandable, right?
You cry
almost
every
made-
meeting.
Well, listen, okay, you guys are powerful and it makes me emotional.
Oh,
Don't blame me. Don't blame me for it.
He loves what he does, so that's why.
So once we were done the interviews, we actually met as a group and started looking at analyzing all of the photos, as well as the journals and the check-ins. At this point, we kind of worked with everybody to see like what is our initial framework, what are some of the themes that we're seeing. And so the results that we're going to talk about in more detail next week actually came out of this data analysis with everybody. So we're going to go through these. Oh, sorry. Yes. Let's ask somebody about how they felt about that analysis process, should we? Crystal, do you want to talk a little bit about how you felt about being involved in the analysis part?
Yes. I just can't see the full words. I don't know how that works.
Oh. Do you want me to read it, Crystal, and then you can elaborate on it?
Sure.
Okay. So you had said to us it was good because then people get all of the perspectives and get a better understanding of the project and the important stuff like research-wise, or maybe it could help other people about what all goes into the process to figure it all out, to help more people out in the future.
So yeah, because like it's helped me and I've been part of other projects too in the past. So it's helped me, and maybe other people don't know about that or don't have the technology to be able to do these things. So just having them opportunities and stuff like that could help somebody else, or me sharing my experience maybe could help somebody else get connected to this type of projects too.
Right. Thank
Help
you.
their lives.
Absolutely. And I think it was nice to have you guys talk about it together because you would kind of bounce off of each other, right? When you were talking about the different themes that came up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
So these are the results here. There were 5 themes that they came up with. The first was discussions around the direct and disproportionate effect of COVID. The second was around the ableist assumptions. Third was around losses that were associated with social distancing and lockdown. Then we had a lot of discussion around changes in relationship and new opportunities and resilience. Actually, we're missing one there. So we're just going to go through these very quickly because, as I said, we're going to spend most of our hour next week talking about these. The first one was the direct and disproportionate effect of COVID-19. So a lot of discussions just around how the restrictions that were being put in place, they were affecting everybody, but for people with disabilities, they were affecting them a lot more, so disproportionately affecting them. And this could really exacerbate their fears, some of the mental health concerns, and things like that, just because of the restrictions that were being put in place. This is one of Zade's journal articles that she put in for us that really kind of captures this disproportionate effect. Zade, would you like to read this out for everybody?
I can watch, but it's not safe for me to be out with the people walking by. It's like being on the street. If people follow the route it can safely, I was awarded my exit home, if not really well I could, but they do not, and I cannot.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So talking a lot about how if other people would just manage to be safe, maybe you would also be able to go outside, but that you weren't able to take the same risks that others were able to take because of some of the additional maybe medical needs that you have, right? Yeah, thank you. We saw a lot around ableist assumptions. This quote here, some people don't think it through. That is an Ashley Zinger, just for you guys. When we talked about ableist assumptions, we were really talking about some of the restrictions that were put in place that really only impacted people with disabilities. So there were a lot of restrictions that have happened because of the pandemic, but these ones specifically impacted people with disabilities. And so Ashley wrote us this amazing journal about one of her experiences. Oh, sorry, this was in your interview, wasn't it? So Ashley, do you want to share this part of your interview with some of our participants today?
Sure. Is it okay if I read it off the screen?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, it says, Dad and I went to an allergy testing clinic because I had a reaction at Christmas time to something we weren't sure of. And they, as in the people at the allergy place, said that I have to come alone. I said to them, who's gonna push my wheelchair? Minion. And they're like, oh well, I guess your dad can come. And they had him like the temperature check and all that garbage. And then that we couldn't get a parking space to get my chair out of our van. This is pre-accessible van, BTW.
No.
So we had to go up to the, like, I think it was like a 3rd floor appointment, and the office was not chair accessible. Like, I barely fit through the door to get the test done. And then I noticed this funny sign, like, this would be an awesome picture. This has me saying, what the heck are they thinking upstairs? Why are they giving out free parking? Because it's a craptacular place?
I love it. Ashley, thank you so much for the wit that you bring to this. I know that it's not been easy, and that was a really not great thing to have happen to you, but you definitely are able to nail what's going on in those situations in so few words. They're so powerful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
One of the other themes that arose throughout the project is the significant amount of losses that our participants were experiencing over the course of the pandemic due to the social isolation and social distancing and lockdown. Participants expressed so much desire and loss about their close relationships with their friends, with their family, with the people that generally come around and are supporting them. They lost their day-to-day activities and often also their work opportunities. And just to show the impact of when they actually got a chance to see them, Damien and Tara were discussing the opportunity that they had to see their grandma after such a long time. Tara, did you want to speak to this?
Sure. Our family is pretty high risk, and so we've been pretty strict about isolating ourselves. And so in part of our interview, we were talking about this photo and said we hadn't seen grandma since Christmas time. And because we didn't really know much about COVID to start off with last March, it was big and scary, but nobody knew what was going on and everybody was locked in their houses. We hadn't seen her and she hadn't come into our house because we wouldn't let her in the house even to use the toilet. Nobody is coming in and out of our house without quarantining for 2 weeks. She came for a visit, and this is how Damien and his sister visited with her. Damien was so happy. If it was a video voice project, the video that I have of him, you can't even hear what grandma is saying because he's just so happy to be seeing her and hearing her. And he was squealing and squeaking and so very vocal and so very, very loud. I don't even know why she kept talking because we couldn't hear what she was saying anyway. And this photo really just captured the distance that we have kept and we continue to keep. This still holds true now that we only visit grandma if she's in the backyard. COVID remains scary for our family.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Another area that we seemed to discuss a lot was the changes in the relationships that the participants were having with the people in their lives. We saw a lot of participants develop much stronger relationships with their family and their loved ones that they were living with over the course of the pandemic. We saw new relationships flourish, as well as we saw some challenges and changes in the relationships between some of the participants with their parents or caregivers, because they were also required to be with each other all the time. As one of our participants wrote in his journal, there have been so many pros and cons to being at home so much. One pro is that I get to work on my private projects like this one. Another pro is that I get to work on this project with his staff. There's also been some cons to being at home so much. I feel like one or both of my parents are constantly nagging me or telling me what to do. I feel like my privacy is constantly being invaded. Before COVID, I had so many places to go where I got to see and spend time with so many different people. Now the only people I spend time with are my mom and dad. I'm still excited to get up in the morning, but I can't wait for this all to be over. I am a young single guy and I've had no chance to meet somebody during COVID. I am lonely. And the final area, which I think is so profound that came out of the research, is the participants found so many new opportunities to stay engaged, to stay busy, to stay connected, and demonstrated resilience and problem solving during these difficult times. Crystal, do you want to explain a little bit about one of the examples of how incredibly creative and resilient you are?
Yep, sure.
Thank you.
So I have my own business. I make jewelry for about 4 years now. And usually I'm in in-person events, but because of COVID, there wasn't the opportunity to do in-person events. So I had to be creative in trying to navigate things online, ways to sell and other opportunities, which could be a challenge because I was doing it all on my own, trying to figure it all out. But at the same time, it gave me some opportunities to do some fundraising, which is great. With my passport dollars, I could purchase some extra beads and supplies. So my friend, a dear friend of mine, Roxanne, was going through cancer during this pandemic. And so I was able to do cancer awareness bracelets in her honor. And so far I've raised $465 for Gervais Cancer Hospital that I will be doing in her honor. We'll be going there with her and saying a little speech and donating the money. Before COVID, I had always wanted to do fundraising with my business, but I hadn't had the opportunity, so it gave me opportunity to get out there more in different ways and to learn other ways. I had some businesses that had my jewelry in there too, and looking at expanding more businesses as the times maybe there's not as much events going on, so looking at other opportunities for it.
Thanks, Crystal.
Yep, no problem.
And you really did such a good job of finding different ways to be able to get your work out there, which is incredible. So one of the things that we asked our participants at the end with the interviews was a bit about the research process. Excuse me. So on this slide here, you will see a painting that was actually done by Zade. I have a screenshot of it so that it can go on the back of my computer. It's fantastic. And I think one of the most impactful things that really came out of the research process was that the individuals felt that their lives had value, and that it can give them the platform to be able to just express that to people in different ways. So I'm going to open this up actually to Tara and Damien. You talked a lot about how, voice and life matters, and I would love for you to expand on that a little bit for people.
Yeah, we've kind of found that a lot of people overlook Damien. It's very easy to overlook Damien and to not take the time to hear his voice. Young adults who don't communicate verbally and who can't, Damien also can't move his wheelchair independently, so he relies on other people to either approach him or to help him get closer to them. He's just kind of overlooked, and people just make the assumption that because he's sitting there quietly, he's not listening and he doesn't have anything to say. And even when we look at research, he's not represented, and children and young adults like Damien aren't represented. And so this was really meaningful that there was actually a group of people that cared to take the time to listen to his voice. And he's got a big smile right now because he's a very social person. And if people take the time to listen and to spend time with him, yeah.
The dimples have come out.
Yeah.
I love it.
I figured I shouldn't talk over top of him since I was saying we should listen to his voice. That would be kind of rude of me. But yeah, this was important, and it meant a lot to us and to our family that Damien was able to be heard when he's not normally.
Thanks, Tara and Damien. Damien, it was a pleasure to have you on there, and I'm glad that we're still kind of doing this work, so I still get to see that contagious smile of yours and those dimples. Sade, before we leave this slide, do you want to talk a little bit about this painting that you made, because it's incredible?
So I did this with.
Do you want to read it?
Yeah. I made this painting because I felt an hope until I put this in this because that I know some people would think I couldn't do, or they would understand. Like I'd like to travel to far away places, and I thought camping, and I couldn't with Sarah, and I bought a bunch of I am a bunch, and I am real, I am home, and I am a real human being. A powerful human being.
You are a powerful human being, absolutely. It's beautiful. I love it. And I love that you've used the artwork to show people that you do just as much as everybody else does, and you love all the things that everybody else loves. And one of these days you're going to take me kayaking too. And you're going to paddle, and I'm just going to sit in the back with a drink, right? That's what we agreed?
I think that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
Come on, guys.
I need your life jacket.
Ashley, how come you're not on Team Courtney tonight?
I don't know. I didn't feel like it. JK.
Oh, God. Thank you.
We'll pull you in a Zodiac vote or something, Courtney.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, I'm just getting aware of the time, so we're just going to go through the last couple slides here. Just in terms of being a part of the research, we had participants tell us that they had learned some new skills and ways of being connected. They understood how the services had maybe changed. The technology was a huge bonus, right, guys?
Yep.
Absolutely. And one of our parents and participants talked about how it actually changed their focus. So, they were really kind of focused on COVID and all the negative things that were going on, but this allowed them to kind of shift, get away from what they felt was like the insanity and the isolation, and have a healthy and meaningful way of expressing what was going on, as well as, having opportunities to looking at different aspects of COVID by being with all of the rest of you and hearing about your stories and the things that you were doing. The other thing was that Photovoice was seen as an accessible platform, and we've talked a lot about this tonight, I think, just in terms of it being something that can be used for people who are typically using different forms of communication, so not necessarily verbal speech. Here we have actually the email from Tara that was sent to us before we even started this project, asking about whether or not Damien could be a part of the project because of his differences in communication. Tara, do you want to talk about that for a second?
Sure. I think it's kind of along the lines of what I was saying. That looking at the flyers for the project, I really wasn't sure if Damien would be able to give his consent. Damien has a lot to say now. And I didn't know if he would be able to do what was needed of him to be able to participate in the project. It quite clearly wasn't a fit for my other child because she's blind. So a Photovoice project really wouldn't have worked out well for her because she wouldn't have been able to see the pictures I had taken. But we found a way.
We did, yeah. And I think that's a good point, right? That there's different ways to make things accessible. And so unfortunately, it wasn't a great fit for your daughter, but Damien, we are so happy to be hearing your voice tonight. Thanks for bringing it out. We also talked a lot about belonging. So this idea that people were sharing the same experiences with each other, and that it was a safe and supportive environment, and that participants were able to generate and lead the participation. So Crystal, you talked a lot about, how you felt like it helped with some of your anxiety, that you were able to connect with other people and understand. And it was nice to have people online that were actually living what you were living.
Yeah. Oh, it's huge.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, sorry, I'm just kind of going through these a little bit quickly because I know that we're running short.
Yep.
Some of the unexpected benefits that we saw that came from this and lessons learned. Crystal, you had talked a lot about how you felt that it gave you the confidence to advocate. So you got some more advocacy skills from participating. Absolutely. As I mentioned, we had one parent talk about how it really changed their focus and how they were viewing and managing COVID-19. Some of our participants talked about how they learned new skills and that they could be authentically included in research. They didn't think that was possible. And a lot of our participants talked about how they had learned from each other through this process. The last part here is just about some of the overall challenges, and I will bring it back to the participants to kind of finish it off for us. Things were not all roses. We did have some difficulties around our technology, specifically, some accessibility issues for taking photos, our connection issues, and even being able to share some of those photos. So Crystal, you had Ashley had a really good point there about some of the difficulties with accessibility and the photos. Do you want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, for me personally, it was hard to figure out who to email because there was like 4 or 5 different emails on the packet that we got. And I'm thinking, do I go right to like the head honcho professor? Do I email the assistant professor? Who do I email? So I just kind of emailed everybody. I think
Right.
everybody just got CC. And then sometimes, depending on my iPad, sometimes it wouldn't open up the link for whatever reason, because sometimes my iPad's a little temperamental.
And technology can be our friend, and sometimes it really is not our friend, right, guys?
No.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, then they had some discussion just around some of the overall challenges that had to do with the interviews. So we kind of talked about this already, but just making sure that we got an authentic response from people, if maybe caregivers or support workers were helping individuals translate what was going on. And then just making sure that they felt that they could be authentic to themselves and be open and vulnerable, because it was really, really tough topics. So, making sure that individuals felt that they could get to a place where they were honest with everybody and sharing those really hard moments. And Ashley, hear you talk about how initially you were kind of like really aware of the fact that you had professors that were working with you. And then you realized, yeah, I'm not going to do this. I'm just going to sit back and pop my popcorn.
And that's exactly what I did.
I love it. That's great. And then lastly, we've talked a little bit about this as well, but just deciding on those interviews or on the images. Terry, you kind of touched on this, but that, it took a lot of extra effort or time, I guess not effort, but time with Damien to kind of narrow down which pictures you were going to send every week. And then just some concerns and risks around taking those photos, in addition to getting close to people, but also, suddenly people are not able to go where they typically would go. So how do you get a picture of those things that you're not allowed to go to, or that they're not safe to go to? So Crystal, you had made a really good point about how you had learned to do a lot of staging around those photos at the end of it.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, I know we're a little bit over time, but I want to thank all of you guys. We can see through this project that people with disabilities are certainly disproportionately affected by COVID and the restrictions. I hope that you will come out next week and hear these amazing people talk more about the results. Make sure you bring your tissues. And I do hope
she's
that
not
we get to
kidding.
see. I'm not joking. No, I'm not joking.
Yeah, no, Courtney's not joking, folks.
Bring your tissues. And I hope that we get to see you all again next week. Thanks, everybody.
So if anyone has any questions for the group, you can feel free to type them into the little Q&A section. But as we wait for questions to come in, if we have any, I just want to say thank you to everyone for sharing some very personal journal entries with us tonight. Ashley, your zingers had me laughing, so that was wonderful. And then Crystal, I will definitely be checking out your creations. That picture they shared sounds really good.
Thank you.
But yeah, thank you again, everyone, for sharing these experiences. You've enlightened all of us for sure. So if there's any questions, you can ask them now. We'll give it a little bit. I'll check Facebook. I have some clapping hands on Facebook.
Yay.
I think we did have a little comment in the chat section. It says, wow, this group really rocks together. So that's for all of you.
Thank you.
It's like another one.
We have a question. Laura or Courtney, I don't know if you wanted to field this one, and I think Laura, you can see the question.
Yeah, is there anything that we would change about the research project if we could? So as we went through the process, is there anything, we did talk about some of the challenges, but is there anything that you would have had us do differently gone through the process?
I think I would have asked, had I known like what this was all about a year and a half ago, I probably would have asked like for PECs. So I know what was expected of me.
Yes.
Instead of just words, because pictures and words I find paired together are a lot easier for me to understand what is being asked.
Mm-hmm. And also to be able to express yourself, because you've talked about sometimes that although you use words, sometimes they don't always come to your mind, or you can't always say them right away, but sometimes being able to share it with an image was easier.
Exactly.
Anybody else?
I think I wouldn't really change necessarily. I think I would invite more people to join and be part of the project. I think, I think of other families afterwards that, are in the same boat as many families, don't have the other connections and stuff like that, to have the voice in it, or other people individually that are by themselves to maybe it would help them have more connection with people and have more support wise, maybe than they have maybe currently. So
Excellent point. Thank you, Crystal.
So I think that is it for all of our questions today. So for everyone that's tuned in tonight, please make sure you come back next Thursday. We're going live again with everyone involved tonight. Bring your tissues. I'm sure we're gonna shed some tears. But yes, thank you again. I know I learned a lot and I can't wait to tune in next Thursday. And thank you again for this amazing work that you've all done together. I think it's super important. And again, an overlooked population that I'm sure most of us had no idea about. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And to you and to our audience tonight, we will see you again next Thursday.
thank you for having us.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye, team. See you next
Bye.
week.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Miss you.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye, Courtney. Bye, Laura.
Bye.
Bye.